Ho, 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 Merry Christmas. It's I. No, not Santa. You've been fooled again. It's me, Mario Mangione. And we're back with another video on the, whatever the fuck this channel is supposed to be. Is it Tekken? Is it Overwatch? Is it me complaining about the newest, hottest thing? Is it rage bait? Movie reviews? What kind of movies? Anime? TV? You'll never know. Is it politics? You'll never know. But no. In all seriousness, today, what I want to talk about is, since it's Christmas time, I want a little Christmas list here. I want to talk about my dream game, a game that I need in my life, right? And that is some kind of Souls-like PvP game, a good one, right? So. I talked about this before on my original Marvel Rivals video during the beta, and I said, I feel like it was a wasted potential. They're going for a hero shooter, that's fine, that's dandy, but since we got superheroes and all that, I feel like something really special could have been made if they took a new direction, took a creative turn, and went for something along the lines of some kind of Souls-like PvP, something like a Sekiro PvP, or Sifu, or Dark Souls, or anything like that. And considering that this is such a popular genre, right, especially with things like Elden Ring, and these things sold millions of copies, why does nobody do this? Why does nobody make a dedicated, good, Souls-like type RPG? The closest things we have is, of course, Dark Souls itself has a PvP mode, but it's archaic and terrible. It's clearly not designed to be a PvP game, but it's there, it exists. And then on top of that, we also have For Honor. For Honor is probably the next closest thing to some kind of PvP, but it's like, For Honor sucks ass. For Honor sucks ass, and not only that, is For Honor also really isn't a actual Dark Souls-like type thing. It's similar, but it's got its own gimmicks. It's really its own thing with the whole triangle guard stuff and all of that. But I feel like something really special could be made with something taking the lens of something like a Sifu direction or something like that, right? And if you know anything about me or this channel at all, I like fighting games, and I also like hero shooters. Those are the two main genres I've spent most of my time playing, is both fighting games and hero shooters. I like both of those, and I like the competitive aspects of those, and they both have so much to offer, right? And I feel like taking this direction, if done properly, could be the perfect blend between both a lot of the elements of fighting games, as well as hero shooters too. And there's so much to offer with this. And even in Sekiro is a game I play annually. Every year, around December time, so around this time, I replay the game. And it started out as the game came out, and then I played it when it came out. And then around 2020, it was COVID lockdowns, I was bored. And I'm like, you know what, I'll play it again. And then I played it again in 2021. And then in December in 2022, I played it again as well. And then by that time, I'm just like, you know what, this is just an annual tradition, and I've done it every year since, and I will continue to do it every year since. It's just a thing I do around December time, and usually it was just because around December time, I found myself getting really stressed, I found myself getting really bored of everything, and kind of getting depressed, During this time, a lot of people have a lot of fucking mental health issues, and it's sad, and to cope with it, I play Sekiro every single year. That's what I do. That's kind of my thing. Just coincidentally, just happened that it's just you know what, I really feel like playing Sekiro again. And I do this every single year. And I've played it a million times, and I love that game to death, right? And these games are just, like I said, they're so widely popular. And I just can't believe no game has really taken to try and actually encapsulate this. Like I said, Sifu widely popular, any Souls-like is widely popular, and Elden Ring is one of the biggest games since ever. I still haven't fucking played it though. That's something that's really been bugging me, is I haven't been able to sit down and actually play Elden Ring, and I've just been dodging. I've been dodging any information about this game whatsoever. Everyone talks about Elden Ring. Everyone's played it, and I'm just like, fuck that. I'm not listening to a thing. Anytime I hear Elden Ring, plug my ears, go la 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 la, because someday I may get around to it. But sadly, I just haven't. To some extent, that bugs me. But these games are very popular, and I think there's something really to offer. A game where you basically have to, lock on to the enemy, and you enter a sort of fighting game type style. Frame data matters, knowing your frame data, and dodging and moving and different types of things. And something like Tekken is a game that I love to death, and I've played so much. And the thing about Tekken has a lot of great defense, because unlike a 2D game like Street Fighter, you have so many different answers. It's not just strike throw, it's not just left right. You have so many different possibilities and so many different things to think about, and so many different defensive options. You can sidestep, you can backdash, you can block high, low, whatever, right? And there's all kinds of different measures of risk and reward that you have to take, and that's part of what makes that game special, with all these different defensive options and then measuring the risk reward within those defensive options. And I feel like something like a PvP Sifu, something like a PvP Sekiro, something along those lines, some kind of PvP Souls-like, can encapsulate that as well, having, different measurement of risk and reward, when to block, when to parry, and even something like Sekiro. I've played that game so much. I know that game in and out, every little fucking minor thing in that game, right? You can even feint in that game. There's not much of a reason to, but you can. If you go in and you swing or charge up your stab, you can go in and block, right? And that will cancel it. There are a couple frames you can do that can cancel it. And enemies that often parry, like Ishin and Owl and whatnot, they will actually actively go and try to deflect it if you try to do that. If you go in, charge up, or try to swing and then block, they will go and try to deflect it, and you'll catch them blocking, allowing you to try and bait out a block. It's because they're CPUs, it really doesn't matter, but you could do similar things. And that's kind of a lot of the mind games with For Honor as well. Sort of the thing with For Honor is you can't, now this game sucks ass. I'll be the first person to tell you that For Honor sucks ass, but it is a guilty pleasure. I love For Honor. I play For Honor all the time for really no reason, and it's probably one of my favorite games, but also, I think it's one of the worst games there is, and I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. This game is fucking terrible, but it's a guilty pleasure of mine. And a lot of the mind games with For Honor is great, right? Not only is there sort of that measuring distance, just like something like any of these other games, and that sidestepping aspect, just like Tekken and whatnot, there's also the triangle guard sort of defense, you know what I mean? And these games have this sort of element where the whole thing, for the most part, now it depends on the character, but for the most part, lights are reactable only by motion, though. And there's this thing called light spamming that people often complain about. But you can try to react to lights only by motion, see which way they're going to guard, and you can try to go in and block that way. And it's preferable to try and go in and, parry it or something, right? You can block, or you can parry. And to parry, you have to press heavy at a couple frames when they go in and attack you. But the thing is because you can only block lights on reacting to motion, you aren't actually knowing if they're light or not. So if you go in and they go in and do a heavy from a certain angle, and you're trying to react to a light, and you try to parry them as a light, they can bait out your heavy, right? And you're, of course, going to win that interaction because you threw out your heavy before them. And that's kind of the mind game of For Honor. That's the thing that I like about it. This was going to be just a short bottom line here, but I want to get more into it because, there's a lot more to this thing. Because, with the heavy also being your parry and having a couple frames of the heavy start up to be the same as the parry, there's a lot more mind games where it's okay, I want to parry heavy attacks, right? Because it's I just block then. I just block if all they're doing is, throwing out lights or light spamming, and it's super easy because you're plus after you block a light, but you're minus after you block a heavy. So it's basically it's if I just block and they start throwing out heavies, then if I just block the heavy, then I'm minus. I'm at a disadvantage. They can mash before I can mash, and that's kind of the mind game with the thing. So it's okay, I'm going to want to parry that, and I go into parry that, and they can feint. They can feint the heavy. So if you're going to try and parry my heavy attack, and then you try to throw out a heavy of your own to parry my heavy, then I can feint that, and then I'll have enough time to hit you with a light, right, and interrupt it, basically baiting out a heavy if you're trying to parry me, if you're trying to parry out a heavy. So there's a lot of interesting mind games with For Honor, but the thing about For Honor is it's the perfect example of a game that was a good concept but terrible execution. But that's not for today. Right? And not to mention there's all kinds of other mind games, character-dependent mind games and sidestepping and all these sort of things, similar to something like Tekken, right? And each character has their own little things. Now, is it perfectly balanced? Is the game good by any means? Fuck no. But I like it. I love it. And I wish there was something more along those lines, right? Something with that kind of element of gameplay. And especially with something like Sifu, where they have the dodge, you can basically do it, throw dodge, side, as well as if you try to hold the block button and then dodge forward, you'll do a backdash, sort of, and that will defend against sweeps. So you could definitely do try to do a high-low sort of mix-up sort of thing. And you can have elements of stealth, running in ducks, right? You could change up the risk-reward by being able to low parry lows, by ducking, and all these sort of things. But of course, mids have elements of Tekken, have elements of all these things. And this is my dream game. Right, and there's so much to this and so much to offer, and I think it could be a perfect element, if done properly, a perfect blend of both fighting game as well as hero shooter ideas, and you can make it characters completely different between if they're locked on or not. There's this one game called Fury that I've talked about before, and Fury is also one of my favorite games. I like this game. It's a fun game, it's really short, and it's basically just a simple boss rush. And the way the game works is it's basically a bullet hell. You're in a bullet hell, and there's just shit spamming all over the place, right? But when you get the enemy low, you can attack them and then engage into a sort of close quarters melee type combat, and it becomes more like a Souls-like. And I feel like a similar thing can definitely be done by having characters that you're basically ranged like a hero shooter. And in these games like Dark Souls and Sekiro and whatnot, not Sifu because they're like being artsy, so they don't want to do a lock on, which I fucking hate that. That's like the one complaint I have about that game, is there's like no lock on, so sometimes like your guy will just fucking bug the fuck out and be attacking like the wall or some shit and going off in all kinds of places. But in Fury, right, there's this sort of two layers of the game, right? Two components of the game. One component of the game where you're bullet hell, and another component of the game where you're sort of in a Souls-like, right? And you could do a similar thing by making the game where you're not locked on a hero shooter, making it where you have to aim, you can shoot, and you have certain abilities with cooldowns and whatnot. Just like something like Marvel Rivals or something like Overwatch or something along those lines. And then when you lock on to the opponent, then your character will switch to a melee, and the game will become more like Sekiro or For Honor, whatever. And you can have this strange dichotomy. I don't even know what the fuck that word means. Am I using it right? Right? You can have this basically two different types of gameplay and different characters that some are better at range, some are better at melee. And this was kind of my wish for something like Marvel Rivals, and I felt like it was a wasted opportunity because they've made so many characters melee, and so many characters that should be more melee. They try to find ways to try not to make them melee because something like melee is inherently hard to balance in a game where half the characters have guns. And when half the characters have guns and half of them have melee, it kind of becomes sloppy. You know what I mean? And I felt like this could have been a perfect opportunity, especially because a lot of these characters, you know, and a lot of these Marvel and, you know, superhero stuff, they punch. You know, that's the classic. They're up close and personal and all that. And it could have been really something special here by having someone like Punisher be more geared towards like range stuff, but still be able to lock on and be like punching and stuff. But he's just a guy at the end of the day with some combat training, so he's not going to be the best. And someone like, I don't know, Iron Fist, his whole thing is punching. So when he's outside of that combat, he doesn't really have the best abilities and the best utility outside of that. And then he locks onto you, and then he's like he has more moves, he has more options, he's better at that close range combat and all that. So you could get a wide variety of players. And there definitely could be something special with something like that. And I felt like it really was a wasted opportunity. Now, I don't want to talk about Marvel Rivals too much because every time I do, it always ends poorly. But Marvel Rivals, I don't think it's wrong necessarily for them to take the direction to be a hero shooter. That's fine. That's okay. I think the more hero shooters, the better. Overwatch has had a monopoly on hero shooters for far too long. But I felt like, you know, they could have really made something even better than what that is, right? Something even better than Marvel Rivals, right? Than what it is right now. You know what I mean? And I'm really feeding for a game along those lines, and it just doesn't exist. It really doesn't. The closest thing I've got is For Honor. And I feel like having basically characters that can, and those are elements of games that I love the most, is games where there's two different types of games within one game. Something like Titanfall as well. I already talked about Fury, but Titanfall as well. Titanfall is basically two different types of games. Normally you start off and it's basically a traditional hero shooter with a fast time to kill, and you run around and you go and all that kind of stuff. And that's the way the game is played. And then you get your Titans. And when you get your Titans, the whole game changes. The whole entirety of the game changes. You become slower. It's less of an emphasis on movement. The game becomes more tactical, as well as the whole game is based around abilities and whatnot. And that's what makes Titanfall a really special game, and a special game to me, and probably my favorite game of all time, is because Titanfall is essentially two games. It's a sci-fi movement, you know, traditional style shooter, and then a hero shooter when you get those Titans. And it swaps between those, and you swap between those all the time, and it makes a amazing experience that never gets dull. And then you sort of like mesh those worlds together, and it becomes, there's a lot to it. There's a lot of depth with that. There's a lot of depth with that concept. A hero shooter combined with a traditional movement shooter, and those two worlds collide and make something special. And I think the same thing could be done for something like fighting games, and then something like a hero shooter, right? Combining those two elements. But anyway, that's about it. And Merry Christmas. That's kind of what I want for Christmas someday. I hope I get something along those lines. But I don't just want a PvP Souls-like. That would be awesome. If I could just get that, I'd be satisfied. But I want that combination. I want something new. I want something special. And that's what I want. A Souls-like combined with a hero shooter. There's something to that. Something to that. But anyway, that's about it. Peace.
This game is so bad, dude. Oh my god, I was just looking for that the whole time, dude.